Gervonta Davis gets a controversial majority draw against Lamont Roach. In this video, I'm going to get into all the details of this fight, analysing whether or not Roach should have got the win, and why Gervonta Davis was so off the boil. We're also going to take a look at the most controversial moment in the fight when Gervonta decided he just would take a knee in round 9, because he felt like it. Really weird moments. All before I reveal my scorecard to you at the end of the video, and I tell you how I think this fight actually went. Hello everyone, and welcome back to a guy called Henry. I hope you've all had a very, very good weekend. I'm in Australia, so for me it is now Monday morning, and I'm knackered. I'm on the coffees, excuse me, but I was always planning on making a video about this fight over the weekend. I did my live stream, and I couldn't quite believe it. The live stream was impromptu. Thank you to everyone who joined me on that. I think I'm going to try and do them as much as I can because everybody seems to enjoy them. I enjoy them. I'm going to be watching the fights anyway, so I might as well get on a stream if I can and get you all involved because it was really good fun. And I had my first ever little bit of donation money, and it was cool. People seem to really like it. So that's going to be something I try and do as much as I can moving forward. These Saudi fights are a horrible time for me, and I tend to go out on Saturday nights, which is not ideal. But anyway, enough about that. We're all here to talk about this fight. This Gervonta Davis against Lamont Roach fight. Gervonta Davis was a heavy favorite going into this one. I hadn't really watched Roach before, and I didn't really know what he was going to bring to the table. But I've always had a picture in my head of how you beat a supreme counterpuncher like Gervonta Davis. And I thought that Roach did a lot of the things you need to do. I thought he was really, really good. I'm not going to tell you what I scored it until the end of the video. I'll give you my scorecard then. But I will talk you through how I saw this fight playing out, what I saw tactically at play. And we need to talk about that controversial knee as well. That was a very strange moment. And I think we need to have a chat about what the hell's happened there. Before I get into this video, don't forget to bang a like on it if you're enjoying it. Don't forget to subscribe to a guy called Henry, if indeed you are new to the channel, or if you've been watching me and you haven't hit subscribe yet. I'd love it if you would. Join my community here. Also, bang that notification bell, because I want you to know when my videos are posted, and it just helps. It means you can come and comment a bit earlier and get in the conversation. And finally, get your comments in the comment section below. How did you score this fight? Who did you have winning? And do you think that Lamont Roach was robbed in this fight? Because a lot of people are running around screaming robbery. And again, I will give you my opinion on whether or not I think it was a robbery towards the end of the video when I give you my scorecard. Now, the first thing we should talk about here is just the general look in this fight. And I felt that it was a very close fight. Whatever way you want to cut it, whoever you had winning, however you scored it, this was a very, very close fight. I was quite surprised. I was very surprised at the discipline that Lamont Roach was able to demonstrate. Now, anytime you don't get knocked out by Gervonta Davis, you've shown great discipline. Even if you just get through on points, Gervonta's only gone to points twice in his whole career. So to be able to get through 12 rounds with Gervonta without getting stopped is an impressive feat in itself. But then to also be able to have success is a different story altogether. Now, I think Roach brought a few key ingredients to the table that made us a really, really competitive fight. And I want to give Roach full credit here before we talk about, things Gervonta may or may not have done right or wrong, because it's always so easy when we have a star name, a star fighter, to wonder what's gone wrong for them. But I want to talk about what went right for Roach first. The first thing was the sharpness of that jab. It wasn't always landing, but it maintained the distance between himself and Gervonta. It meant that Gervonta was always on the end of it. And I know that Gervonta wants that. Gervonta is a counterpuncher, so he always wants there to be a little space between you. You'll always see Gervonta taking little half steps back, trying to make a little bit of extra space so that when you go in, you overcommit or you undercommit, you miss long or you miss short, and then he can make you pay with rapid and powerful counterpunches and countershots. And I felt that Roach did a good job of just remaining really, really on that jab, really sharp, really disciplined. And there was a moment early on when we saw Gervonta start trying to counter off the jab, but he didn't really have too much success with it. The most success Gervonta really had in terms of punch selection in this fight was shots to the body. When he was stepping in with those body hooks, that was working quite well for him. But other than that, Roach really wasn't giving him a lot. And I was watching it, and as I was watching it go through the early to mid rounds, I did start thinking that Gervonta would start timing that jab, and it never fully came. I thought that Gervonta would start to take control of the fight. I thought that he would start to learn Roach's patterns, and he would start to make him pay and punish him. But the big thing about Roach in this fight, the big reason why Gervonta Davis wasn't able to land a monster counter like he normally can, set that trap and explode, is that he was so damn disciplined. And in particular, with his defensive hand positioning, he was so good at getting his hands back up after he did his work. The other thing that I really enjoyed from him was the way that he countered the counters. So he might throw something, Gervonta comes back with a counter, maybe he misses, maybe it lands, but then Roach would throw another shot. Roach was always trying to have the last word in the exchanges. And I just thought he did such a good job of remaining on his game. It's so easy to get drawn into it with Gervonta, and you could see constantly through the fight they were talking back and forth. They were goading one another. They were talking to one another, and there was a little bit of roughhouse tactics from Gervonta as well. I seem to remember in a clinch him shoving his shoulder in. Roach was reprimanded at the end because I think he gave him a little punch in the clinch. The referee didn't like that, but he was giving it back. And Roach did not give Gervonta anything. He didn't accept Gervonta as the A side in this fight. And I think that probably goes back to the historical sparring stories between the two. I think they used to spar when they were amateurs. I heard Tank's former head coach, we don't quite know what the relationship is. It's a bit vague. It's certainly more distant than it was, but his long-term coach, Calvin Ford, was talking about how they used to go back and forth in sparring. We will actually talk about that Calvin Ford element before the end of this video. I think the head coach, the change of dynamic with the coaching team is something we need to talk about before the end of this video, and we need to speculate on that a little bit. But before we do that, as I say, I want to give full credit to Roach. The other thing that I saw from Roach was just really good footwork, really disciplined footwork. You never saw him lunging in. You never saw him lunging in. He was never able to time him. Gervonta, that is. He was never able to time Roach. He edged his way forward. It was discipline personified. That is what you need to do against a counterpunch. You can't make mistakes. You can't overcommit. And that is what Roach did. I also thought Roach was great with the left hook. The left hook landed pretty well. And we saw Gervonta taking a lot more clean shots than we've seen in recent fights. I mean, he really was doing really well. And it was up close as well. It was up close. He worked really well on the inside, Roach. And he was punching on the turn as well. So when Gervonta was trying to, use lateral movement and pivot out, Roach would follow him around and keep throwing punches. And that was really good as well because, when a counterpuncher or when anybody is on the move like that, it's extremely hard for them to counter you. So that is when you can commit a little bit more. And there were moments in the fight when Gervonta was in front of him with a high guard and Roach was throwing 3-4 punch combinations. Most of them weren't landing, but you'd get the third shot in or the fourth shot in. And overall, I just felt like it was a great game plan from Roach. I really did. And I have to be honest, during the fight, mid-rounds, I was like, okay, I expect it to start slipping away from now. I'd sort of almost built this narrative in my head of what I normally see with a Tank Davis fight. And before the fight, I was saying, first few rounds, expect Roach to probably rack up a few points. Gervonta will start to work him out, down the information, and then he'll start timing him. But as it went on, it just didn't happen. It just never came. And Roach rolled on, and he did such a good job. And I think that, look, I'm giving Roach all the credit here. It was close regardless. This was a close fight. He didn't win all the rounds. There were moments where Gervonta was having a little more success than him, landing those shots to the body, landing clean punches in the exchanges. Maybe Gervonta was coming out on top slightly at times. But the point is, it was competitive all the way through. The other thing we have to give both men credit for is toughness. Both men incredibly tough. Both men ate some pretty sizable shots. And both men had good chins. But in particular, I have to give Roach credit there because he's gone in there knowing I'm in there with a renowned puncher. This guy knocks out everyone. And I'm going to go in there. I'm going to have to be in the pocket at times. I'm going to have to hold my feet at times. And again, I think it's that history between them. I felt like Roach, I think people were saying in my live stream, people were like, Roach has got that dog in him. And it's true, like he just didn't back down, didn't give Tank an inch. He didn't give Tank any possibility to sort of overwhelm him and take control of the fight. And it just seemed like it was a defiant performance from Roach. That's how I would describe it. Now, I think the main reason that Roach was able to have so much success in this fight was because, as I say, his game plan was designed and built for fighting a counterpuncher, someone with minimal output, someone who is waiting for you to do something wrong. And I believe that what Gervonta got really wrong here and what he needed to do differently was he needed to have more of an offensive output himself, just generally speaking. He was waiting far too long for Roach to get something wrong, in my opinion. I felt that Gervonta needed to have more looks to his game. All he had was one look in this fight. It was that element of, can I make you miss? Can I make you pay? And when you're talking about, let's talk about someone like Terence Crawford, for example. Terence Crawford, phenomenal counterpuncher, such a good counterpuncher. But he has so many other looks to his game, so many other abilities. Terence Crawford's got a fantastic jab. He's got fantastic body work. And Crawford is somebody who can lead off when things aren't going his way with the counterpunching. We saw it against Madrimov. That was exactly what he had to do against Madrimov. It was something he had to do against David Avanesyan as well. So, it's a part of his game that is there and it is useful. For me, Gervonta, he needs to have a more active output. It doesn't need to be hugely creative. It might just be that he jabs more. Get behind that jab sometimes, working with the jab, because you've just got to be doing something when nothing's happening at times. And you've got to be giving Roach more to think about, because every time he was able to enter the pocket, it was kind of on his terms. He's decided, I'm going to take a chance now. And you're not giving him enough to think about the rest of the time defensively, in my opinion. All he has to do is not make a major mistake. That's the reality of it. He's just got to not make a big mistake. Whereas, with Roach, he was forcing the issue. With Gervonta, he was stepping in, throwing multiple punch combinations, throwing around the guard. making it more of a thing that Gervonta wants that. He wants you to attack him, but not in the way that Roach was doing it, where it was so disciplined. So for me, the big thing that Gervonta lacked here was a second look, a third look. He just was too one-dimensional in this fight. His one dimension is elite. It's world-class. He's a world-class counterpuncher, no question about it. But sometimes you've got to take control. Sometimes you've got to lead off. Sometimes you've got to give Roach more opportunities to make mistakes. You've got to make him feel under pressure, feel like he's got to fight his way out of difficult situations at times. And Gervonta just didn't really make him do that. He almost has sort of a lazy style in my mind, Gervonta. And I think that speaks to where his mind is at as well. There's been comments from him saying he's thinking about retirement, that maybe he's not in it anymore. This was in the build-up to this fight. And I think that we won't really know how that impacted his performance, because at the end of the day, we won't know until we see the next fight. But you have to see a consistent level drop, because we don't know, was this Roach was great? Was this that Gervonta's slipped a little bit and he's not taking it seriously? It's really hard to tell. But then we've got to also add in the element of his main coach, his long-term coach, Calvin Ford, not being a main part of the camp for this fight. And the quotes around it are very vague. He's sort of taken a step back. He's still in the corner, but he's not in the corner. You've got to wonder whether, at the very least, him not being in the corner on fight night, I think I'm right in saying he wasn't in the corner on fight night, from what I saw, from what I read, that's got to maybe make a difference to how Gervonta moves through the gears in the fight. So that's something we should consider and think about. Has that impacted this fight? It's got to have had some kind of impact on the fight, because you build a training team to try and get the best performance. So potentially moving forward, Gervonta needs to make sure he is around a little bit more. Now, the next thing we have to speak about is this knee that Gervonta took in round 9. It was an unbelievably strange moment in the fight, and I was totally shocked and confused during my live stream. And I have to say here that the referee has absolutely bottled it. He's absolutely bottled it. And I think if it's a fighter with a smaller name than Gervonta Davis, this is scored as a knockdown. You give this as a 10-8 round, you count him. Now look, in terms of sporting achievement, if you want to call it that, does Roach deserve to score a 10-8 there? Well, in terms of enforcing the issue with a punch, no. But in terms of Gervonta Davis just deciding, I want a timeout, yes, he absolutely deserves it. It's ridiculous. Gervonta afterwards said it was because he'd had his hair done recently and there was too much grease and oil in his hair from what had been applied to his hair, some sort of product, and it was going in his eyes. Well, guess what, mate? That's your fault. It's you that's in charge of your preparation for a fight to make sure you're on point, and I have absolutely no sympathy for him. There's zero reason that the referee should not have scored a 10-8 round there. There's zero reason why he shouldn't have been given a count. You can't just pause the round because you feel like it. He can't just make up the rules as he goes along. And in reality, we know how the judges scored this. It was 115-113 Gervonta, 114-114, 114-114, a majority draw. If this is scored as a 10-8 round, then Roach wins the fight. He would have won a majority decision. So Roach would have won the fight if this had been scored as a knockdown. Now, I'm going to give you my scorecard, and I can actually put it up on screen right now. And this was my scorecard. So I scored the first 2 rounds for Roach, third round for Gervonta Davis, the 4th round for Roach, the 5th, 6th, 7th for Davis. And that was when I felt like he was starting to get a bit more of a foothold in the fight. I felt like he was starting to take control a little bit, but then Roach brought it back big time. Round 8 for Roach, 9 for Gervonta, and then 10, 11, 12. They were brilliant rounds for Roach. I gave round 11 a 10-10 draw, but if anything, I was massively leaning to Roach then, and I only gave it a 10-10 on the 11 because I thought I saw Gervonta land some big shots. But if I was going to review my card, possibly I could have given an earlier round to Gervonta, possibly I would have given round 11 to Roach, but either way, I scored it 115-114 for Roach. I scored this fight as a win for Roach. Very, very close on my card, but if anything, the rounds where I wasn't sure, I would have leaned more towards Roach, I think. So I definitely feel that very close fight. I'm not going to sit here and scream robbery, because at the end of the day, I don't think it was one. I believe that it was a really, really razor-close fight. I think when it's like that, you always hear people giving you that old adage, you've got to rip the belts off the champion, and whether you like it or not, Gervonta is the name fighter. The champion really just means the fighter with the bigger name at the end of the day, in my mind. That's the fighter who you've really got to beat well in boxing. And Gervonta here was not beaten super well, in my opinion. I think Roach could have taken it by a round or two. That was my card, but it was razor close. The rounds were razor close, and I think that I think it's wrong to call it a robbery. But at the same time, I can see why people are frustrated, because it's like Roach performed brilliantly. I think Roach won, and people kind of feel like he was never going to get a decision, and that might be true. And in that sense, it is a robbery, right? If he was never going to get a decision, it's a robbery. If no matter what, everything was against him and he wasn't going to win, then I guess you can call that a robbery. I'm not going to do that because I think it was a close fight. I don't have a massive issue with someone scoring it for Gervonta Davis, but at the end of the day, I scored it for Roach, and I would lean more towards Roach. If you were forcing me to go through and change my card, I think you would have seen me having a wider card for Roach than a wider card for Davis. But guys, I want to know how you scored the fight. I want to know what you saw in there. What did you think about Gervonta taking that knee in round 9? I mean, to talk about that, 114, 113, my card would have been even wider if indeed you'd scored that knockdown. So I think when you take it in balance, Roach will feel very, very hard done by, especially because of the controversy around that knee that Gervonta took. And I just feel that the next move for these men, I think that you got to do a rematch. And it's weekend of rematches. We saw it with Donovan Crocker as well. I think they need a rematch. And, refereeing controversy in that one. Again, I think this is a really controversial one, because I think Roach will feel like he should have won the fight. I think Roach probably did win the fight. And I think if you're Gervonta Davis, it taints your name a bit. And I think you have to give him a rematch. Now, what I will say is, if there is a rematch, I will favor Gervonta Davis for a rematch. And the reason for that is it's just how I see boxing, and it's logical. And it's to do with styles. And I think that the longer that Gervonta spends in the ring with Roach, the more chance there is that he lands on him, that he finds that big shot. Because when you're a counterpuncher, it's all about having timing, all about having information, and about knowing what you need to do. And I think that he would find that shot eventually. Having said that, in my mind, it was Roach who was growing into the fight as the rounds went on. So that might defy the logic I'm using there. But that's just a first thought. I would want to go back and properly tactically analyze this one. And I might do that if they do a rematch and have a proper look at whether or not I think Roach can get the win in a rematch. But they should do it. I don't know if they will, because they might feel like they've got away with one here and they want to go make bigger fights. But for Gervonta, look, people keep saying to me, is Gervonta going to fight Shakur Stevenson? Do you think he'll take Shakur Stevenson now? Everybody seems to want to see that fight. Honestly, to give you my really basic analysis of it, I think Shakur is probably about the best version of a Lamont Roach you can get in terms of the defensive work, the foot speed, the jab, all that stuff. I think Shakur, is a more elite version of what Roach is. Probably less punching power, potentially less punching power, but he has enough pop to keep you off him. And I just think that Gervonta knows this kid, if he wants to, he can go in there for 12 rounds and make zero mistakes and just point you. And I think that's what you would see. I've felt that for a long time, and I feel it even more strongly now. So I don't see why Gervonta would fight Shakur. It's a disappointing reality. They should be fighting each other, but I don't think they will. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please get your comments in the below. Would you like to see that Gervonta Shakur fight? Do you want to see a rematch? Let me know. And as I always say, on to the next one.